Good evening. Welcome to Alan's Italy. Tonight we are going to be talking about Alan's Italy, my personal journey. As you know, as I've mentioned many times, I did 3 library forums in Kingston, in Woodstock, and in Saugerties, and I spoke about how I got, it's really the story of how I got to be sitting in this seat right now doing Alan's Italy on a weekly basis. And it starts with my whole journey of, meeting my friends in Italy and the effect that Laura had on my traveling experiences and so on. So that's going to be the focus tonight. The reason I decided to do it on the show was that several people told me they always wanted to go to the library forums, but they couldn't because of time constraints. And once you do it, it's not like a course where you could keep going. You can go back to it, or if it was on YouTube, of course, people could see it. Once it's done, and that's it. So I decided that I was going to do the actual library forum on the show, and then it could be a matter of permanent record. So that's what I'm going to do there. So tonight's show will be kind of that. So if you saw the library forum in actuality, when it took place in one of the 3 places I mentioned, then this is just really a rehashing of that, and you could pretty much either watch it again or turn to something else. But there it is, my personal journey. So we'll get to that in just a few moments. But first, a couple of things. First of all, I just did the continuing education program known as New Paltz Lifetime Learning Institute. That was on Wednesday. It was really, really fun. It was really interesting. The best audience that a teacher could have, former teacher could have, is an audience of adults, and these people were in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and they were a wonderful audience. There were about 25 of them, and it was great. They had a lot of questions. One woman kept me after about 20 minutes asking me she actually had a whole list of questions she wanted to ask. So that was fun. We walked outside the room and we sat on a bench, and she asked me all these questions. So that was fun. And I have 7 more. It's an 8-session program. This coming Wednesday is off because of the various holidays. So I pick it up again on March 27th. So I'll be doing that. The other thing is that those of you who watch the show on a regular basis and would like to know what's on Friday nights and what's on during the week, during the repeats that come on, I will be trying to do that in the Woodstock Times. Now, there's a feedback section where you could write a letter to the editor, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to write a letter to the editor, which basically states that this is the schedule for Woodstock Public Access coming up during the next week. And I sent a letter, an email to the other producers. If a producer would like to advertise a show that they're going to be doing that they think might be of public interest, then they could email me at alansitaly@gmail.com. Or if my audience would like to know what's coming up on a particular Friday or what's coming up then during the following week, then they could go to that and they'll be able to do that. So I'm going to try to, continually send this, letter to the, it's called feedback in that section. So I'll be doing that. And if they don't mind too much, it'll be a very, very short paragraph. It won't even be a paragraph. It's just going to be an item which says, Friday night, March 22nd, let's say, Alan's Italy, my personal journey, and whatever else, just brief statements. So, for my audience and for everybody else's audience, this may be a way of finding out what's coming on in the future. And if anybody's watching the show who's a producer, the same is true. Just email me, and I'll have it in during the Woodstock Times that comes out, I believe Friday mornings. I'm not totally sure on that. I know that I once heard it was Thursday evening, but I really have never seen it earlier than Friday morning. So that's what's going on. And, here's my personal journey. And this is basically my life of traveling in Italy over the past now 21 years, since this is 2013. I began in 1992. Oh, this is this is the New Paltz Lifetime Learning. I just wanted to show this. That was the first class I did on Venice, so we pick it up again on Lake Como next in 2 weeks. Okay, so my first trip to Italy was in August of 1992, and these are the places that I went along with my ex-wife and my daughter, and we knew nothing about Italy at all. In fact, the first trip that we had planned, this trip, we had decided to simply go to Rome and Venice. We were going to go a week in Rome and a week in Venice, and we knew nothing about what was in between. Really, oddly, I mean, I know this sounds really strange and really weird that somebody who now knows so much at the time knew so little, but I didn't know much, and we were going to just take the train from Rome to Venice. And then my ex-wife, Wendy, went to work that next Monday, and people that she knew told her, well, if you're going from Rome to Venice, why don't you stop in Florence? All you have to do is get out of the train, and you should go to Florence. And Wendy came home and told me this, and I said, well, what is Florence, and why would anybody want to go there, and where is it? And, that seems pretty weird for a person who actually took art history in college, but did very poorly. I wasn't really interested in art at the time. So, that's how it all started. And then I began to do research and realized what a basic ignoramus I was by not knowing what Florence was, and I began to really start to study Italy. So from that point on, and I would say that was the spring of 1992, I began to really study Italy, and I've done so regularly ever since. So these are the 4 places we visited. This is the picture. This is the only picture that we could find, which is a picture of, from left to right, of course, that's me, my daughter Jennifer, and my ex-wife Wendy. And Jennifer had just graduated from high school, and this was going to be her graduation from high school present as she was entering college. And that's a picture of the 3 of us on a bridge in Venice, with me wearing my Firenze t-shirt. Firenze, of course, is the Italian name for Florence. So that was us on our first trip. And of course, we went to Rome, and that's a picture of the Colosseum, and that's where we went, but didn't actually get in. Couldn't get in for some reason. And then we went to Florence, where we really became kind of infatuated with the city of Florence. And then we went to Venice, which is, amazing, as you know, as I've showed you. And this is Milan. This is the Milan Cathedral. So we've spoken about this as well. And then we came home, and, in the past year, I've written this book, and the book is based on 5 people who've had a major impact on my life of Italian travel, namely my friend Lidia, my first Italian friend that I met in 1995, my friend Luca, who works in Florence at the hotel, whom I met in probably the early 2000s, and Franco Sala, who I met in 2003. I'll talk about all of that as time goes on. And then, of course, when I got to know Laura and we got married, Laura introduced me to a lot of different concepts in Italy. And of course, I wouldn't be doing this show if it weren't for my engineer, Ellen. So those are the 5 people that I'll be focusing on, including the very final part, which is Alan, which is basically a story of how all this came together, and we had this amazing trip that Laura and I took in May of 2012. So we start the story with Lidia, and this is my friend Lidia. And Lidia, of course, works in Florence. She actually lives in 2 different places. The first is her own house, which is located in western Tuscany, in the town of Chiesina Uzzanese, and the hometown of her mother, who lives in a town which is located about 15 minutes northwest of Florence by the name of Comeana. But Lidia works in Florence, and when I fell in love with Florence, I kind of also fell in love with Lidia to a certain extent. This is the hotel that I've stayed in for the past 17 years, the Hotel Croce di Malta, and on that same block is located Lydia's store. This is Lydia's leather store. This is not where I met her. Her leather store was actually further down the block, but we met there, and she then moved to this much larger store, which is closer to the hotel. And this is what the inside of her store looks like. And that little stool you see there in the front, I mentioned this before, I'm sure, is the stool that I always come in when I'm shooting the breeze with Lydia on an afternoon. I'll sit on that stool, and she will either do her various leather products, make her leather products, or sell to customers. The customer she's selling to on the right there, of course, is Laura. But this is the happening place on Via della Scala, where Lydia has all her friends coming in and meeting her and talking to her and gossiping, and I've always been very interested, and that's where I sat. This is a picture of me and Lydia in one of our favorite restaurants by the name of Dante's, which is on the other side of the Arno River, called Ultra Arno. This is a picture of me and Lydia when we were traveling around Tuscany in the year 2002. And Lydia took me to a variety of places. This particular location is Volterra. And, she took me to many other places. This is, I believe this is one of the towns. I'm not sure of the town. It could be Volterra. It could be San Miniato. It could be Civita di Bonareggio. Not totally sure, but that's certainly the way we looked in the year 2002. These are some of the places she took me to. This is, of course, Civita, the view from Civita. This is a picture of Lydia's friend Sabrina, who used to travel with us sometimes on our day trips around Tuscany. Here we are sitting in a cafe in Anghiari, where we stopped to have a little cappuccino. You can see the water bottle in the front, and we just sat here to relax and take it easy. And, I was being shown around Italy by two native Italians. And this is an example of having dinner at Lydia's house. And there's Lydia on the right with two of her friends and me, and Laura's taking the picture. And we had a wonderful dinner with these people. They spoke very little English, so Lydia, of course, did the translating. This is a dinner that Laura and I attended. This is actually a lunch that I insisted that we take Lydia and her family. Lydia and her family always make incredible dinners for us. And I said that I'm not having another dinner in any of their houses until we have the opportunity of taking them out for either dinner or lunch. And they chose a Sunday afternoon when we were with them, and they took us to Anghiari. They decided that Anghiari, there's a castle there, where they wanted to have lunch, and this is the restaurant, and that's her whole family right there with Laura in the front. Okay, now Luca, my friend Luca, that's a picture of him. He's a very good-looking guy, as you could see. We met in the hotel, and that's the way he looked when I first set eyes on him. Probably, he claims that he's known me since the 1990s, and I told him that we really didn't get to know each other until I started coming to Florence alone in the year 2001. But that's Luca, dressed formally as he was waiting on customers who come to the hotel. This is Luca and I at the Villa Serbelloni in Bellagio, where we were, visiting for the day. Luca and Mary, his partner, and Laura and I. This is Luca's hometown of Felligna Valdarno. As I've said probably before, Luca has only lived in 3 places his entire 50 years of his life. He's lived in Florence, he's lived in the town of Panzano, and he's lived in the town of Felligna Valdarno, all in Tuscany. So Luca is quite thoroughly native Tuscan and born in Florence. And this is a scene in Luca's apartment. He has a condominium that he and Mary own, and we're about to sit down for dinner, which that picture will come up in a moment. And Luca and I were sitting and conversing while Laura was taking pictures and also videos. And some of you who have read my book know that the cat that you see there on my lap looked very content as I was petting it for about 15 minutes. And when this picture was finished being taken, the cat suddenly turned around and bit my finger. So we don't know why the cat did that, but who knows. Anyway, this is the dinner. This is one of the dinners. This isn't the dinner that we actually had that evening. This is another dinner that Luca and Mary were preparing for us. The table is there set, and we usually start eating dinner around 9:30 in the evening, and we continue eating well into the evening. At this particular dinner, we actually were up until about 1 or 1:30 in the morning, eating all the various courses that Mary had prepared. She is a fabulous cook. And this is an example of the four of us. Laura is taking the picture, but this is me trying vehemently to explain to Mary and Luca how the United States government works. And, I got very vehement in my explanations, and I'm trying to explain to them, and they're looking at me, and the looks they're giving me is bewildered, because they have no idea why the United States did not have universal health care, did not have a guaranteed 7 weeks vacation for all workers, why if a worker switched jobs, they didn't take their health insurance with them, and so on and so forth. And I'm just trying to explain that that's not the way things are in this country. And Luke is looking at me. Mary probably doesn't know what I'm saying because she doesn't speak that, well English, but Luca is looking at me and saying, what kind of system is that? Let's not go into that. And then, of course, Mary and Luca took us to many wonderful places, one of which is my favorite area of Tuscany, and that's eastern Tuscany. And there you see a picture of the area known as the Casentino. The Casentino is an area in eastern Tuscany, and the scenery is absolutely beautiful. This is a road that we took on the way to the magnificent town of Poppi, and you could see that it's a little bit different looking from, if you remember the shows I did on central Tuscany. It's more of, in central Tuscany, it's more rolling hills, and in eastern Tuscany, it's more mountainous. So this is what we're looking at now, the mountains of eastern Tuscany. And that's another view of a road that's, kind of winding through the hills. And, you still get the same magnificent cypress trees that you get in central Tuscany, in eastern Tuscany. And they're all over, and you can see how beautiful that looks as you ride down a road surrounded by these beautiful trees. And in the background is a church. This is a castle. This is from the trip we took with Luca and Mary in 2012 when we went to the, this is the 2010 trip when we went to the Castello Romagna. This is a 13th century castle, and that's a better view of it, really. It's in, kind of disrepair, but pretty well preserved considering it's, 700 years old. This is one of the ivy-colored covered buildings that we saw on the side of the castle, and we wound up in the town of Poppi, and that is the town building, the municipal building in Poppi. This is one of the really beautiful churches in the town of Poppi, which is located in eastern Tuscany. Of course, you get the usual beautiful streets. And this is another view of me taking a picture of Luca from one of the top of the ramparts of the castle. Then, of course, we have Franco Sala. And my meeting Franco Sala occurred in the year 2003. Now, what happened was, and this is described in detail in my book, and when I did the library for him, I actually read this particular section, but it was the hottest summer in the history of Europe. It was the summer of 2003. It was over 100 degrees like many, many days, and unfortunately, there were many fatalities due to the intense heat. And Laura and I were traveling around, and we started in Spain, and we wound up in France, and we ended that particular part of the trip in Italy. And when we were in Florence, we suddenly looked at each other after 3 weeks of traveling, and Laura said, "I'd like to go home," because we've been traveling just too long. So we actually didn't go home exactly at that moment. We kind of curtailed the trip by a week. And we couldn't get two flights together. So Laura went home, and I stayed in Florence, and I spent a lot of time with Lydia. And I said to Lydia, I'd like to go to a really beautiful place in central Italy, preferably Tuscany, but I'm going to leave it to you to choose the place. So Lydia and I decided to go out one afternoon, and she took me down the beautiful route past some beautiful Tuscan towns, and I kept saying to Lydia, Lydia, stop, these towns are beautiful, let's stop and really get a chance to see some of these places. And she said, no, 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 relax, we're not there yet. And then we went to, we went right past the town of Orvieto, which is beautiful, as you know, because I did 2 shows on Orvieto. And I kept saying, Lydia, we've got to stop, these towns are beautiful. And she said, be patient. We finally wound up in this town, which to me is the most extraordinary small town I've ever been to in my life. It's the town of Civita di Bandereggio. It was the topic of, I believe, the 4th show I did, all the way back in the early 2000, in the early part of 2012 when I first started doing the show. And on that day in 2003, we began walking around the town, and it was a beautiful, beautiful town, as you know by looking at some of the pictures that I've shown over the course of the past year. It is, quite spectacular. This is one of my favorite pictures in all of all the pictures we have of Civita. It shows you just how picturesque it is and the architectural beauty of it. This is also one of my favorites, and you could see that, and these buildings are several hundred years old. The town itself, of course, is 2,800 years old because it's an Etruscan town, but these buildings are probably from medieval times, and you can look at that. So you get these spectacular views, and we were walking around, and I was, Lydia kept saying to me, what do you think? Was it worth going past all those towns you wanted to see? And I said, absolutely, this is the most incredible place I've ever seen. And this is, people really take care of it, and from the walls you get these incredible views. There's another view of Civita. I just can't get enough of this town. In fact, we're going back there in 2 months. Look at that view. With the arches, one arch leads to another with beautiful stairs and so on. Down the side streets and up those stairs over there. This is the main piazza, and up those stairs is Franco's restaurant. And this is a picture of me actually meeting Franco. Franco was waiting on tables. We were the only table that was occupied at the time. So Franco came over, and and then at the moment this picture was taken, I had turned to him and I said to him, Franco, where did Rick Steves sit when he came here? Because Rick Steves is a very famous tour guide who writes tour books, and he put this town on the map. Nobody knew about this town until Rick Steves wrote about it in his book and wrote about Franco. And I said, Franco, where did Rick Steves sit? And he put his hand on my shoulder. As I looked up at him, he looked down at me, and with his left hand, he pointed to the table that was on the other side of the restaurant. And Lydia snapped the exact picture of that occurrence at that particular moment in time. That was the beginning of our friendship, but we didn't know it, really, until years later, because I didn't see him then until 2009. So for 6 years, he faded out. I faded out of his memory for sure, but he never faded out of my memory, nor did his magnificent town. And we returned, Laura and I, in 2009, and this is a picture that was taken. We arrived at the restaurant after it was closed, and I said to the hostess, I'd like to meet Franco again. I met him 6 years ago, and I'd like to see him again. He came out. I introduced myself. He said, yes, I don't remember you, but unfortunately we're closed, but sit down, I'm going to serve you a meal anyway. So at 3:30, a half hour after the restaurant is scheduled to close, he brought out first a carafe of wine, as you could see right there in the front, and then he brought out 2 plates of the most delicious pasta I've ever eaten in my life. Laura and I still talk about the two bowls of pasta. One was with red sauce, one was with a light sauce, and it was just amazing. And that's a picture that we took during that encounter. This is a picture of Franco and me when we had traveled to Civita with Randy. You remember our friend Randy in the year 2010, and that's a picture that was taken then. When we went in 2012, we didn't go to Civita di Bonareggio. We went to Luca's, rather Franco's town where he lives, which is Orvieto. This is the town of Orvieto, taken from the south. And it's, of course, a beautiful town. This is the road that Franco was explaining to us was an ancient Rome, which people can now use because it's now paved. But and that's the beautiful scenery surrounding the town of Orvieto. And this is some of the streets in Orvieto. This is the cathedral, which we've spoken about and we'll speak about again in the future. It's a beautiful town. It's not quite as charming, in my opinion, as Civita di Bonareggio, but it's a very, very beautiful town, and we love going there. And it's a big town, so it's not like there's one or two restaurants. You have a choice of many restaurants, although we like the two places, La Palomba and La Grotto. Those are our two favorite places to dine. But you can see that it's more substantial a town than is Civita. And then the fourth part is, of course, Laura. And the effect that Laura had on my life of Italian travel is really on many levels. But the first thing is that Laura took magnificent pictures, has always taken magnificent pictures, using a little more sophisticated camera than I use when I used to go on my trips alone or with Wendy. And so Laura, that's the first thing, magnificent pictures. The second thing is that Laura kind of gave me the confidence to do something in Italy that I'd never done before, and that is to drive a car. Having two people in the car who can drive and somebody to kind of give you encouragement and moral support makes it a big difference. So I began to drive in Italy, and I'll show you some of those pictures in a few moments. And the third thing she did was to really come to the conclusion, as I came to a little earlier than this, because I had been there before. She had never been to Italy prior to 2002, that Italy is the most amazing place she's ever been, and it's really worthwhile to spend every vacation just traveling around Italy. So based on that, my life began to really focus on Italy as never before because I just stopped going to other places. And I won't say that that's going to continue because I do have a desire to return to France and even to Spain someday. But right now we are in the Italy mode, and this fourth part we'll talk about Laura and my travels in Italy since the year 2002. This is a picture of me and Laura on a bridge. All the great pictures are on the bridges of Venice, and this is the way we looked in December of 2002. And I will add to you that hat that I'm wearing, with the scarf, with the gloves, and with that beautiful leather jacket, were all bought for me by Laura in Florence just before we left Florence to come to Venice. And that's how we looked in the year 2002. And, we went all over. We went back to Florence a lot, as you know from my discussions of Florence. We did a lot of traveling in Florence. We did a lot of traveling around the city. We went to places that I'd never been. This is not one of those places. This is the, Palazzo Vecchio, which I've been to many, many times. I had never been to the synagogue, however, and Laura showed a desire to go there, so we went there together in the early 2000s, and we were not able to get in at the time, but we did eventually get in. And it's, of course, very difficult to get into the synagogue. To give you an update on this, when we get to Florence during the trip that we're taking coming up in a couple of months, I have an appointment with the director of this particular synagogue. I've been emailing with that person over the past several months, and he is going to be giving us a guided tour of the synagogue and doing something for us that we never thought we'd ever be able to do, and that is take a picture and a video inside the synagogue. They do not allow you to bring any photographic equipment or any equipment. Everything has to be left at the front desk with an armed guard. And then you can come in and see the synagogue. But this fellow, Daniela, is going to be giving me a guided tour. He'll tell us about the Jewish population in Italy, most specifically in Florence. And he will also have with him the president of the Jewish congregation in Florence. So we've given him a couple of hours of time, and we're going to go there, and we'll be taking some interior pictures, which I don't have, in my possession at the time. Of course, Laura and I went to Rome, and we spent a lot of time on the various piazzas, one of which is one of my favorite piazzas, the Piazza della Rotondo, which has, of course, the magnificent Pantheon, the ancient Roman building, one of the most well-preserved Roman buildings in all of Italy. And then, of course, we went to Venice. This is my picture, a photo taken by Laura of the Piazza San Marco. In Venice, this is the Rialto Bridge. And this is, one of the most beautiful churches in all of the world. So that's hard for me to say because I haven't been to probably 90% of the world or even more than that. But this is certainly one of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen in Venice. The Chiesa, actually it's a basilica. It's more, it's more than just a church, and it's not the actual cathedral of Venice. There's another church in Venice. It's actually the cathedral, but this is a basilica. So, and this is amazing. And then, of course, we decided to take trips into Tuscany, and this is one of the first times I ever drove. We drove through the hills, the rolling hills of Tuscany. And, you can't really understand and appreciate Italy until you've had a chance to drive around Tuscany. And this is one of the scenes that we took. And you could see how incredible, charming it looks in that picture. We visited amazing small towns, such as the town of Anghiari, which is a town that I had been to with Sabrina and Lidia in the year 2002. But Laura and I kept going back there. Once we actually had some incredible pizza that we still think about, and we still believe the most beautiful pizza, the most delicious pizza we'd ever eaten was in the town of Anghiari, right in that town. It's quite a lovely town, as you could see. And this is another scene of the Tuscan hills. Probably, Anghiari is more in the central portion, but more to the east, near where the town of Arezzo is located. This is more to the west, more where Montalcino and Montepulciano is located. And that's another view of, again, central Tuscany in the area known as the Val d'Orcia. And you could see how just, driving around here, it kind of draws you back. You want to keep returning to this magnificent scenery. This is what a road looks like. And this isn't much of a picture. It's just really a road traveling through some scenery on a very, very cloudy day. But you could see, even on a day like this, it is really quite spectacular with those cypress trees off to the side and a stone building also over there on the right side. This is another view of central Tuscany. And this is not actually Tuscany. This is the Dolomites, when we drove through the Dolomites. And one of the things I never thought I'd ever do in Italy is drive into the mountains on some of those winding roads. But again, with Laura, I was able to kind of, steel myself to do that. And one of the things we passed was this magnificent town in the Dolomites. Another thing we did, in fact, this was one of the first trips we ever took in Italy, was to visit the Amalfi Coast. And this is the town of Sorrento. We actually took this picture, Laura took this picture, of an incredible sunset in Sorrento, looking out at the Bay of Naples towards the south. You can't see it in this picture, but around that bend over there in the center, there's kind of like some land sticking out. Around that land is the island of Capri, which most people pronounce Capri, but it's really Capri. And this was such a stunning picture. And when Laura came home, she actually did an actual painting of this particular scene, which we called Sorrentine Sunset. But this is our favorite town in the Dolomites. It's actually on Lake Como in the town of Varenna. So this is the town of Verena with the beautiful church steeple in the middle. This is the Villa Monastero, which is located in the town of Verena, right near the hotel that we stay. This is the well-known picture that I'm always showing this picture of Bellagio. We're on a ferry now, looking back at the town of Bellagio with the Alps and the Dolomites. I'm not sure if those are the Alps or the Dolomites, actually, but it really doesn't matter because those are the mountains of northern Italy, snow-capped, as you could see. This is one of the streets in Bellagio. They don't just have normal streets, it's all traffic-free, and the way to get from one part of the town to the other is to take these very steep steps, and off to the left and right are some of the stores. This is a view from a hotel that we once stayed in with friends, our friends Linda and Bruce, right on Lake Como, but in the town of Bellagio. We only stayed in Bellagio once. We stayed in Verena 3 times. That town across the way over there is the town of Fiumilata, right opposite Bellagio. This is the Villa Cerboloni, which is one of the famous villas along Lake Como. This is another sunset. Laura loves these sunsets, and this is one of the most beautiful, taken from our hotel window in the town of Verena at the Hotel Villa Ciprese. This is not actually Italy. This is Switzerland, and this is Lake Lugano, looking at it as we're approaching from the east. So, we actually came down and spent the afternoon right along the waterfront. This is Lake Maggiore, again at either sunrise or sunset. To me, it seems like this could be sunrise, but I'm not totally sure. But this is Lake Maggiore from our hotel window. This is a scene at one of the very famous villas that are located on the islands on Lake Maggiore. And this is a scene of a peacock. And Laura caught the exact moment when the peacock spread its feathers and captured this really extraordinary picture. And this is a view of that actual garden on Isola Bella. There are 3 islands, Isola Bella, Isola Pescatore, and Isola Madre. This is Isola Bella, and these are the beautiful gardens that you get to see when you travel around those islands. This is on Cinque Terre, which is the area of the southern Riviera, which is, of course, right on the Mediterranean. This is the town of, here we go again with these blackouts where I can't remember the name of the town. Almaty. I can't believe it. Can't remember the name of the town. Unbelievable that I would forget the name of this town. I'll probably remember it when I get home. Something Almaty. Forgot the name, and I just don't feel like, dwelling on that for the moment. This is the town of Pisa, looking at it from the bank of the River Arno, which actually also winds through Florence. This is the town of Orvieto. This is Lake Como again, looking towards the mountains. And again, Laura captured this incredible view of the mountains. And this is also on Cinque Terre, but I haven't forgotten the name of this town. This is the town of Manarola. In order, the towns are Rio Maggiore, Manarola, Cornelia, Vernazza, and one of these, those of you who are in your 60s and 70s know what it feels like to absolutely have a complete blackout of the name of a town. Not only is it a name of a town that I love, but it's the name of a town that I pine to go back to. So I certainly better remember the name before I get back. This is an interesting story. As we were headed from Cinque Terre south towards Pisa, I said to Laura, let's drive into the mountains. And we drove past this particular town. The town at the foot of the mountains, as you could see, is the town of Carrara. And those of you who know a little bit about marble sculpting know that the town of Carrara is where marble is quarried. And what you see there are not snow-capped mountains, but marble in the mountains above Carrara. So I said to Laura, let's go into the mountains. And she said, well, I don't know. It sort of looks like, there's some marble maybe, but it also looks like there's some snow up there. And if there's snow, we really shouldn't go. So I said, nah, we're going to go anyway. And we started to go into the mountains. And I said, wow, look at that marble. It's like all over the place. And Laura was saying, no, to me it looks like snow. And we kept going through. And of course, we were taking these hairpin turns, which is not one of my favorites. And this is a view of actually a series of hairpin turns going through that region, going higher and higher into the mountains until finally it became obvious to us that yes, indeed, or obvious to me at least, that there was snow on both sides of the mountains. And it became thicker and thicker. And you could see that on the actual road, there's ice on the left and on the right, especially on the left side. And when we got to this point in the road, I decided that this was just too scary to go continue. And we decided to turn around and come back, which we did. So that was a unique adventure. And this is our trip back. And you can see that it looks like most of the road is quite slick with ice and snow building up on both sides. And the higher you get in the mountains, you get more of that. And this is another view of that really horrific trip where we were riding on ice for part of that. Okay, and this is part 5. Part 5 is my experiences in the studio. And there's a picture of Ellen in the studio putting on a show. The show that you see now is put on in that studio. The person who got me into the whole concept of doing Alan's Italy is Richard Spool, who was one of the technicians in the studio. And it was through his help, not only in giving me the idea, but also in helping me adapt my equipment for the studio equipment. So I owe Richard a great deal. This is what the studio looks like. It's actually a church that has been converted into the Woodstock Community Center. And right behind that, on the other side, is the entrance to the studio. And that's what it looks like from where I'm sitting, looking towards the console. There's my briefcase over there on the left, and there's the camera, and Ellen at the console, engineering the show. That's what it looks like, of course, as you're looking at it. That's me at the table with my computer on the right side and the camera in front. Of course, the videography and photography are performed by Laura, as you've seen many times on this show. Some of my guests, Frank Pelaya, who was on last week, who does like his incredible photography and has helped me do many shows. There is Rick Hurst, who has done many, many shows as well. This is Professor Eve Dombra, who was with us last summer when she did 2 shows on ancient Rome. She is professor of art history at Vassar College. This is one of the books I wrote. This is the birth of a television show, which tells the story of how this whole television show came about. And this is the part 6. So part 6 is, we've done the show now for several months, and when we went to Italy in the year 2012, last May, we had a lot of things lined up, interviews and cooking demonstrations, and a lot of things that we were going to do. We started out in Orvieto, and one of the groups of people we met were the people who run the Ristorante La Palomba. And the fellow on the left is the owner of the restaurant, John Piero, the chef, and that's me and John Piero's wife, Carla, who unfortunately is no longer with us. She was, she had cancer and passed away within the past few months, so that's very, very sad. She was, as you can see, she's a vibrant, wonderful person. So that's really a very, very tragic event. This is a picture of Franco, who took us into the restaurant and was doing most of the translating for us, talking to his good friend John Piero in the restaurant. This is the hotel we stayed in, and these are the people who run the hotel. And that's another restaurant that we went to, La Grotta, and that's, of course, the picture of me showing the owner of the restaurant, Franco, how to do my napkin folding technique. And right after he did this, I asked him for a job for next summer. And, of course, I'm not going to be working there. And this is while I was doing the actual interview of the owner of the hotel, with Franco doing the translating for me. And then, of course, we went to Pisa, and that's the famous Leaning Tower. But we were really there for this hotel. This is the Hotel Royal Victoria, which I knew was going to be a very special hotel, and that's the reason that I decided that I wanted to stay there. And we actually had the room with the balcony right there. You could see in the front there's a balcony with several windows. We had one of those rooms with an extraordinary view. This is the view we had from the balcony, and unfortunately it was a rainy day, but the view we had was still pretty spectacular. This is Nicola Piegaya, who is the owner of the Hotel Royal Victoria, who gave us a really wonderful 20-minute interview on videotape that I showed on, one of the shows that I did when we came home. And we hope that when we're in Florence this coming May, that we'll be able to have dinner with him. He's a wonderful man, and I hope that we get to go back to that hotel someday. And this is another one of our adventures. This was the Villa Palagina, which is the place we stayed one night on our way to Florence. This is right near the town of Fellini Valdarno. And in this hotel, we met this lovely lady. Her name is Susan Chalkley, who gave us another wonderful interview that you saw on the show. She is the resident artist at the Villa La Palagina, and you could see her. That her job is basically to make beautiful art and sell it in their various locations throughout the hotel. And we've become friends with Susan. And then, of course, we went back to Florence, where we stayed for several days. And while we were in Florence, we interviewed, this is a fellow named Martellini, who is one of the spokespersons. I keep forgetting names. Thank you. His last name is Martellini. He is the one of the spokespersons for the Movimento Cinque Stelle, which is the kind of the five-star movement that elects. He did very well. Actually, he's not the leader of the movement. The movement is actually led by a fellow named Beppe Grillo. But in the election, his particular movement had a lot of people voting for it. And we hope to visit with him again. And then this is the owner of the restaurant La Spada. And he was about to give us a beautiful cooking demonstration. So this is Giuseppe, and we will be doing another cooking demonstration later on. This is the five of us. That's Lidia and Mary and Luca and Laura and I having dinner at the restaurant, and we all went out for dinner. This is one of my favorite pictures of Luca and me. We're waiting for the women who are, all gathering their belongings to come with us out to dinner, and that's us sitting there showing our mock displeasure at having to wait. That's a picture of Luca with his beautiful daughter, Greta, in the hotel. That's the four of us on one of our trips. Luca took us to this wonderful, wonderful town of Loro Cefena, and that's the town which I highlighted on the show once a few months ago. It's a beautiful town, and we did an interview with the fellow who runs the mill. And this is an 86-year-old gentleman who was very gracious to give us an interview. And this is the town of Borgo Boro, which is a beautiful town, also in that region. This is the town of Laterina, which had a beautiful castle, some views of eastern Tuscany. And then, of course, these are some of the projects that I've done as part of my journey. I did the Life Spring Socrates program, continuing education. I'm in the process of doing the New Paltz Lifetime Learning Institute. And of course, I did the Library Forum in Woodstock, Saugerties, and in Kingston. My website, which gives you kind of a summary of all the things I've spoken about this evening, and also access to any show that you may have missed or a show that you may have enjoyed seeing and you'd like to see it again. There are links to the YouTube channel. This is next week's show. I'm going to be doing a show in which I give you my personal tour of the Italy dining experience from my point of view, and this should be very interesting. That's actually one of the restaurants on Lake Como. So that's it. So I'd like to say to you, but first let me go to this. It was certainly a pleasure bringing tonight's show to you. I'm sorry I forgot the name of that town. Monterosso al Mare, that's the name of the town. It just popped into my head. Monterosso al Mare, beautiful town. Anyway, thank you for watching, and buonanotte e buona fortuna.